Whether it is a renowned explorer venturing into uncharted territory, or an ordinary person just going out on the water to enjoy a beautiful day, there is something extra eerie about just how many people have disappeared at sea. Welcome back everyone, thanks for tuning in to another video. My name is Kennedy, and today we are going to be diving into the dark world of unexplained disappearances. So buckle up, because these are the top 10 people who got lost at sea and were never found. Starting us off at number 10 is Scott Smith. Back in the 80s, one of the biggest bands was a Canadian rock group called Loverboy. I mean, Workin' for the Weekend is still played on radio stations today. So when one of the founding members, Scott Smith, seemingly vanished from reality, there were lots of questions. Back in November of 2000, after playing with his band in Vancouver at a benefit, Smith, along with two other friends and his girlfriend, set sail from Mexico on a 37-foot sailboat. As they were sailing down the coast, nearing San Francisco, the weather started to get rough and the waves started to get dangerous. Then, one large wave, roughly 20 feet in size, knocked over Smith and sent him shooting off the deck of the vessel into the water. His friends on board were not hit, but were in shock about what had just happened. They searched for the man overboard pole, but it had been taken by the waves along with their friend. Within 20 minutes, the Coast Guard helicopters arrived and dispatched 2 search boats that scoured for hundreds of miles to no avail. Still, his family were bound and determined to find him, so they even paid for a private search. Unfortunately, that too was fruitless. To this day, Smith's remains have never been uncovered, and no one knows if he truly did lose his life to the sea that day. Moving on to number 9, Bill Tilman. In 1977, 80-year-old Bill Tilman, who had already been dubbed one of the greatest adventurers of the 20th century, was invited to join the en avant crew, who were mountaineers sailing to the South Atlantic to climb Smith Island. The expedition was led by Simon Richardson, and the crew, like Bill, were all very experienced. But mysteriously, neither Bill or the rest of the crew ever arrived at their intended destination. Even after an extended search by the British Royal Navy, they were no closer to solving the mystery of what really happened to Bill Tilman. Moving on to number 8, Harold Holt. Nearly 2 years into his term as Australia's 17th Prime Minister, Holt vanished into thin air. Back in December of 1967, Holt, who had always been an avid lover of the ocean, decided to set out for a little trip with 4 other companions. However, on the way back to Port C, Holt insisted that the group stop by a small remote beach for a quick swim after lunch. Holt was a strong swimmer and said he knew the waters like the back of his hand, and they had done it many times before. But still, the weather was rough that day, so only one of his friends agreed to take the dip with him. His friend stayed close to shore, but Holt took a different approach and decided to venture out further, but seemingly got caught up in a wave and in the blink of an eye was gone. To this day, his body has never been found, although a 2005 investigation concluded that he could have drowned. This investigation, however, didn't stop many from theorizing that the leader had faked his own death or that he was some sort of secret CIA agent. While it does sound a bit ridiculous, technically he has never been found, so I mean the truth is still up for debate. Moving on to number 7, Bison Dele. Once a firecracker player for the NBA, at the age of 30, Bison, who had changed his name from Brian Williams, unexpectedly retired from the game and ran away to live a carefree, adventure-filled lifestyle in Lebanon and across the Mediterranean. From there, he moved on to Australia, where he began learning how to sail and bought a boat he named Hakuna Matata. Then in July of 2002, he decided he was going to set sail from Tahiti to Hawaii and invited his girlfriend as well as his older brother Miles along on the trip with him. However, Bison never made it to Hawaii, and neither did his girlfriend or the captain of the boat. The only person who was ever seen again was his brother Miles, who returned to Tahiti alone on the boat a few weeks later. However, 2 months after their mysterious disappearance at sea, Miles was arrested in Phoenix trying to buy gold with one of his brother's checks and was found using his brother's passport. Even more suspicious is that just 2 days prior, authorities had found the Hakuna Matata with its license plates removed. removed, covered in what appeared to be patched up bullet holes and registered under a different name. Many believed Miles was very jealous of his brother's success and money and killed him as well as the other two on the boat and threw their bodies into the ocean. But no bodies have ever been recovered, so it's never been able to be proven. Plus, the only person who could have given a first-hand account of what went down, Miles, overdosed on insulin and died in September of 2002, leaving the entire ordeal as one big mess. Next up at number 6, Austin Stephanos and Perry Cohen. In July of 2015, two teenage friends, Austin Stephanos and Perry Cohen, often went out fishing together. The boat they used belonged to Austin's family, and his dad and grandfather were very confident in his abilities to maneuver it, saying he had driven it many times. Still, the boys usually stayed fairly close to the coast. One night, however, they decided to take a trip over to the Bahamas together. So the next morning, they made their way over to the marina. Austin texted his parents at 11:25, and then the pair boarded the 19-foot family boat and set sail on their fishing trip to the Bahamas. Shortly after their departure, a bad storm started to appear, and the National Weather Service announced an official warning. But it was too late for the boys at sea. No one knows exactly what happened to them, but somewhere in the Atlantic, the two disappeared forever. The boat they had been driving was later found, with a few items on board, but sadly, the boys were never seen again. Moving on to number 5, Patrick McDermott. Famously, Patrick was the on-again, off-again partner of pop star Olivia Newton-John for 9 years between 1996 to 2005, and at the time of his disappearance in 2005, Patrick was on board a Mexico-bound fishing boat, which was apparently somewhat of a frequent activity for him. But this time, he never returned. He boarded all alone, and despite some of his personal belongings, including his car keys, passport, and wallet, which were found on the boat, Patrick was never seen or heard from again. What's especially strange is that according to the Coast Guard, there was no sign of accident, criminal activity, or an attempt to take his own life on board. The most accepted theory of his whereabouts after a PI was hired to look into the case for Dateline is that Patrick faked his own death to avoid substantial debts and allow his son to cash in on his life insurance policy. There are even some conspiracies that he remains hiding out in Mexico to this day with a new girlfriend, but officially there is no concrete evidence that that is true. Moving on to number 4, Theodosia Burr. Daughter of the 3rd Vice President of the United States, Aaron Burr. If you've ever heard of a little Broadway musical called Hamilton, or just happen to be a history buff, then you may already be familiar with Miss Theodosia Burr. But one thing they left out in the show was that Theodosia mysteriously vanished from the spotlight in 1813. During her time, Theodosia was quite a controversial figure. After Hamilton alluded that her and her father had an inappropriate relationship, it's believed that that is what led to the duel where Burr killed Hamilton, for which Theodosia later helped her father flee the country. But from there, her life only got worse. It's believed the young woman suffered uterine cancer, and on top of that, wrote to her doctor sharing symptoms of hysterical fits, seeing figures in the night, witnessing flashes of light, and hearing strange noises. But once her son passed from malaria, sending her into a deep depression, Theodosia decided to go and visit her father, who she desperately missed. So she boarded the Patriot, a small boat that was scheduled to take her from Georgetown to New York, where her father had recently returned. But curiously, the boat never arrived in New York. In fact, the boat never arrived anywhere, as far as anyone could find. It was as if it vanished into another dimension. To this day, the disappearance of Theodosia Burr remains a great mystery. Moving on to number 3, Slim Wintermute. Back in 1939, the National Collegiate Athletics Association, or NCAA, held its first ever men's college basketball tournament. As is often the case with firsts, the player from the winning team at the University of Oregon, sometimes called Tall Furs, became kind of low-key celebrities in the area. One of these famed Tall Furs was center player Slim Wintermute, because he could dunk the ball, something that was quite the novelty at the time. Sadly, however, after college, Wintermute didn't hit the big leagues. Instead, he ended up working for an airplane manufacturer in Seattle, got married, fathered 3 kids, and lived a happy, quiet little life. But in October of 1977, he would once again become a well-known man, but this time for a much more tragic reason. At the age of 60, Wintermute and a friend went out to enjoy a little boat trip on a nearby lake. However, the next morning, when his friend awoke, he found that he was left all alone on the vessel. Wintermute nowhere in sight. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to the man, whether he fell overboard or mysteriously ran away, and as no remains were ever discovered, we will never be able to fully confirm what happened. Moving on to number 2, Dan Burack and Patrick Horgan. Back in December of 1967, Captain Dan Burack and his friend Patrick Horgan departed Miami in their cabin cruiser named Witchcraft. Now, maybe it's just me, but that does feel a little on the nose. The pair were traveling on a 23-foot luxury yacht with the innocent intention of watching Miami's Christmas light show from a nice view at sea. But after reaching just 1 mile from the shore, the Coast Guard received a call from the captain of the boat stating that the ship had hit something. The captain assured the Coast Guard it was nothing serious and that there were no substantial damage, but still the Coast Guard wanted to come out and see for himself. The Coast Guard immediately left his station and in just 19 minutes arrived at the area where the Witchcraft was. Or rather, should have been. The area indicating the ship's location was completely deserted, with no signs of any ship having been stranded or even present there previously. Over the next few days, officials searched hundreds of square miles through the ocean to track down the lost ship, but they were never able to track it or the 2 men aboard. And last up in our number 1 spot, Henry Hudson. For someone whose name is plastered all across North America, very little is actually known about Henry Hudson. He was likely born around 1570 and began making his known voyages in 1607. However, it was his 4th and last voyage that remains a historic mystery. Hudson's ship, the Discovery, left London on April 17, 1610 with a crew of 23, including Hudson's son John and Rupert Jewett, who had been with him since his 2nd voyage in 1608. However, things on board were not amicable, it seems, and that September, Hudson held a trial of his mate Jewett to air allegations that he was plotting to seize control. In the end, Hudson spared him from punishment but replaced him as mate with Robert Bylot. Hudson continued to sail across Hudson Bay all the way south to James Bay, at the dismay of his crew, but soon it was winter, which meant a complete and utter halt. Fast forward to June of 1611, and after a long and cold winter had come and gone, Hudson finally agreed to begin making his way back to England. However, for some reason, before leaving, he replaced his mate once again with another sailor, John King. But this would start a mutiny. By June 22nd, while stalled in ice on James Bay, a faction of the crew seized control of the ship, and Hudson, with his son John and 7 other crew members, were forced into the ship's boat and cast adrift. They were never seen again. Well, that's all I have for you today, friends. I hope you liked this video. Before you go, leave a comment down below letting me know which of the disappearances you think is the scariest. And with that, I'm out. I'll see you next time.